Welcome to our webinar. I am Leonard Murphy. I am with Greenbook. I'm sure you've probably heard my name. I'm not going to go into the bio because you're not really here to hear me. You're here to listen to our guests. So why don't we do an introduction from that standpoint? And we'll start, Sarah, with you, since you're with Prolific and you are the generous host of this webinar.
Yeah, the second in command. Thank you, Lenny. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for giving us a bit of your time. I'm Sara. I'm the VP of Product at Prolific. I have had the great fortune of working at Prolific for about 2 years, almost exactly to the day. And I look after our product design and research functions here, and obviously do a lot of thinking about the current state and future of behavioral research and data collection. It's lovely to be here.
What better topic is there? Is there anything else to think about?
I think about it all the time.
I know. It's a whole other conversation about what that means for us as individuals in our personality quirks. Anyway, Jessica, please introduce yourself.
All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Jessica. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Remesh. I have the pleasure of working with our internal research team, with our research and development team, which is in charge of our algorithms, with our product design and engineering team, and across the entire Remesh organization to develop a platform that's really valuable for researchers so that they can do their work with intention and efficiently. Our goal at Remesh is to give researchers superpowers so that they can do their work and really shine. And moreover, our mission is to give people a voice and make sure that their voices are heard. We were founded under the idea of empowering people and making sure that they can connect and be heard. So we also think a lot about data collection and empowering voices. And so that's why I'm really excited to be here today to have the opportunity to speak with Lenny and Sarah. I personally have always benefited from talking with them before, and so I'm happy to do this in a public setting, and also really excited to hear questions from the audience. So let's get it started.
All right, sounds good, Jessica. So why don't we kick off with a poll? We told you a little bit about us, but before we dive into the topic, Chloe, can you pull up the first poll for our audience? So what type of research do you do? So we have a little bit of insight into you. And while that's happening, let's kind of start off with the state of the union, if you will. So the point of this is a conversation about audience data in the age of AI. And 2 years ago, just 2 years ago, AI was this very niche topic that companies like Prolific or Remesh would talk about from a technical standpoint, and then the world changed, and not just the world, but fundamentally our industry as well. So my view, for what it's worth, I want to hear from you guys, is that we truly are now in the era where data is the new oil, if you will. It is the core product that keeps the world moving. And that the insights analytics industry is transitioning and transforming before our eyes from a very bespoke, focused on a specific project type of role into now feeding the beast, if you will, the LLMs in a very purposeful and structured way. And I think even the last week or so, there was some information that came out about the potential of model collapse, which just highlighted the constant need for new data to be coming in for AI to realize its potential. And there is no better conduit in the world, from my perspective, than market research, or we think of as market research, to do that. And it starts with good quality data. So it's Prolific. And if that's the well, and we'll continue my analogy, companies like Remesh are the refinery, right? It's the way that you get it out and extract it and make use of it. So that's my take. What do you guys think?
Maybe to deepen that, Lenny. Yes, we're in a very interesting moment of zeitgeist. We're feeling it really directly at Prolific. As you mentioned, we sit at the sort of bottom or the root of the entire pipeline or the entire community and ecosystem of data collection, we take care of the people involved in this. And as such, what we're seeing sort of reflected off the AI data set moment, or the sort of that very hungry feed the AIs, as you put it, is some new practices and norms that are starting to sort of bleed over or also be sort of absorbed or normalized in the other industries that do research and data collection. So as an example, we're seeing a new emphasis on huge volumes of data, often programmatically accessed, unique data. So, as soon as you think it, you want it available via online sample and online research. There's a deeper need for humans exercising their human skill as opposed to doing mechanical research or simplistic research. So we'll talk a bit more about that later in the hour. We are seeing a lot of demand for creativity and attention to detail. So that's sort of the way that we think about data quality is starting to shift a little bit. Whereas sort of in traditional academic research, maybe naivety was really important and being sort of blinded to the research at hand. This is sort of changing now, and the idea of what good looks like is changing with it. We're seeing new sampling logic, the way that people expect research participants to access their research and their data collections, and how many people see different variants, and who checks whose work and things like this. That's starting to come into play a little bit. And also just as a big, broad area of scrutiny and change, ethics, right? So whereas there were bits of our industry in the last decades where sort of cost was maybe king, we're now seeing an equal and sometimes foregrounded focus on the ethics of data collection and the integrity of that relationship between researcher and participant, as we call them at Prolific. So just a few observations from my side.
Wow.
Great observations. Yeah. Jessica, how about from your
no, that's incredible. I mean, Sarah has a much deeper lens on this. I think what's interesting to me is that even though there's such a change in kind of the research composition, where there's so many more AI researchers with maybe some different needs, at the end of the day, quality is still king. And I had the opportunity to talk with a product lead at a large AI organization just yesterday, and I was asking him about model collapse and kind of how he's seeing trends in the industry. And it was interesting because he was talking about how even though model complexity is increasing, so we need even more from the training data set. And if we think about a data wall where we don't want AI training AI, we need humans in the loop. I think it's going to put pressure to be able to do even more with the data that we have and require higher skilled participants, higher quality participant data. And I think that, and I know, Sarah, you can talk more to this, but the way that Prolific has set up an infrastructure to ensure that participants are capable of doing the training that's necessary, I think that's a really strong foundation for what we're going to start seeing as necessary.
Yeah. Well, let's play off that, Jessica. So, full disclosure, I've known the folks at Remesh since you were babies, and am an advisor. So I have a perspective on the trials that you have faced over the years in finding quality, scalable solutions to put respondents into your platform, and then along came Prolific. So tell us about that, because it was a struggle to find that.
Yeah, thanks for having us relive that, Lenny. No.
You guys count on me to poke the scab.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Prolific and Remesh, we started working together just a few years ago, but our stories actually ran in parallel much earlier than that. So it's interesting, both Remesh and Prolific were started by PhDs looking to have a positive impact in the world. And then we both came up through tech incubators, Y Combinator and Techstars, respectively. So we have this shared background in terms of having very value-oriented, very mission-oriented, and being strong technology companies. You could really say that Prolific is the Ben to our Jerry. We're values-oriented, quality-oriented, and we want to be, brands that consumers can really trust. But to your point, Lenny, Remesh, we were built as a platform for data collection and this kind of conversation platform, as I was alluding to before, making sure that people's voices are heard. But we never were able to build up the community to feed that platform ourselves. We tried, we failed, and then we tried working with some other common sample providers in the space, and both their tech infrastructure and the quality of their participants just wasn't high enough for us. Because we do qual data collection, the participants needed to be very high quality participants. They weren't just answering closed-ended poll questions. We needed them to express themselves in multiple sentences. So it was really wonderful when Prolific built their API. That is what enabled us to integrate with them. And we've been off to the races ever since. We're at the very beginning of our partnership. We have a lot planned, but that's been the big unlock for being able to bring audience really quickly into Remesh.
Yeah, and the last week the Inside Association does an annual report on this, from a financial standpoint of the industry and the top 50, and was looking at that, and the industry grew overall, but the major sample providers, the largest in the space, shrank. And I think that was entirely based on quality. And you can't say that oh, it's because the industry declined. No, the industry grew. So the demand for sample only increased. It's just the old ways of sourcing and engaging and delivering sample seems to be declining because of the issues around quality. So excuse me, I'm so sorry. So Sarah, that's something that you guys have taken really seriously. So kind of tell us about that journey from a Prolific standpoint. I'm going to go on mute while you do that.
Yeah, so interesting. I think just to kind of riff off the last point you were making, Lenny, and first of all, before that, just to say, the Prolific and Remesh partnership is one of these sort of matches made in heaven. I think that we believe in everything we do. We have this culture at Prolific of people who are mission aligned doing things together that change the world, and that goes for our partners, that goes for our relationship with researchers, and that goes for our relationship with participants. So this is one of the most sort of striking examples for us on the inside. And I think, as Jessica was saying, there's a lot of very exciting things coming down the line of this partnership. But Lenny, you were saying that people who are kind of ignore quality at your own peril sort of thing is coming to be the norm. And I think, just to riff off that a little bit, something we're seeing in this age of AI is a lot of self-policing of the ethics of like sample creation and data collection from industry players and private players. And we are sort of pulling each other along on that journey in conjunction with and in conversation with public bodies. But in many cases, I'm sure everyone on the call has sort of come across these thought leaders who are sort of quite, raising their voices for the importance of ethical and high integrity data collection from real humans who are treated well, and building AIs that represent us. So we're seeing a lot of this, and in terms of quality and the way we view it at Prolific more broadly, I think just to kind of go back to our origin story a little bit, as Jessica's done, we grew up in academia, and because of that, we have this sort of scientific rigor is built into our DNA, and scientific rigor is built into the way that our participants and our researchers originally met each other, right? And so that sort of heritage has persisted throughout the years and is now applied to sort of the market research and user testing and AI training and et cetera industries. We also, obviously, there's this sort of virtuous cycle of the network over time, but also I would be silly to pretend that was the whole story. I think we do a lot of proactive work at Prolific to maintain. So we have to run to maintain and sprint to innovate when it comes to fraud detection and quality. So that is a moving target for us. And as a rule of human behavior, when there's money on the line, people are incredibly inventive, right, in order to get their hands on it, right? So some things we've been doing recently, we're obviously very, very deeply invested in LLM detection and contravened LLM use detection, right? So when people do not want you to use ChatGPT in providing your research responses, but you are. And also more recently, you know, how geolocation works on the internet is changing. It's a fascinating and very deep space that we're in right now. So how IP addresses are working is changing. So these are the kinds of areas where we're pretty active at the moment. And finally, and just not to sort of underplay this, we really put our participants at the heart of our business, and we have dedicated participant care teams on both the support and product sides. And we survey them for wellness, and we insist on and monitor minimum reward and make sure that's a fair sort of wage or reward value across the world. So these are the sorts of things we're doing that kind of work in concert to make sure that the sample stays sort of at that level that Jessica's talking about.
Well, you know, and it's interesting. And I think about till just now, there's a theme already running throughout this conversation, right? So from my old fogey perspective on the industry, right, that the shift was towards speed and cost efficiencies, and kind of the first generation of online sample went along with programmatic advertising. Same idea, right? Because there were speed and cost efficiencies. What wasn't necessarily prioritized was quality. Quality was considered to be table stakes. And it's really only recently, because of the growth of digital qualitative, that it became very glaringly obvious that there were quality issues overall. And then along comes AI, which is reinforced that, right? It's allowed qualitative, a big bucket qualitative, right? I don't mean necessarily for focus groups, but a conversation with folks to scale, to become much easier to do. And therefore, again, reinforcing like, oh, wait, this kind of cheap and fast approach to engaging with humans opens itself up to a lot of quality issues. And you guys learned from that, right? You came in prolific, and now the balance has to be quality first, while also achieving the speed and cost efficiencies that platforms like Remesh need. So, have you seen, Jessica, that because of the integration now with a quality and scalable and cost-effective solution, that's opening up the door to greater usage of the Remesh platform?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. And, quality also comes hand in hand with trust. So I think it's not just the quality and the trust on the participant side, but also through the entire application. And just to give an example, as you said, Lenny, we started to see the rise of large language models about 2 years ago. And as Remesh, we waited to do any integration until we had access to the enterprise API, where the data collected on the platform would not be used to train the models. That was really, really important to us because of the rigor of our privacy and security for our clients, because that's a priority for them. So, it's the trust on the data collection side, and then also the quality and the trust of the participants. Those two things together have really opened up opportunities for our clients to use Remesh for a wide variety of their work. Just to riff a little bit on your comment around speed and quality, large language models have certainly made it very fast to do a lot of the analysis side. And I can speak a little bit to that. We do a lot of work on not just the data collection, but how you analyze it on Remesh, and we leverage our own algorithms and large language models for that. But where Prolific has really sped up our process is on the recruiting side. So whereas it would take at least a few days, we have a really quick service team, but at least a few days to recruit high quality participants, we're seeing on with our integration with Prolific, it's a few minutes to set up, and then it's hours to get participants in. So that, that's a huge differential from weeks to days to hours, and it shortcuts the entire time to insights for our customers. So we've got I think dominant market researchers in this conversation. We've got market researchers using our platform and this integration to do a wide variety of their work, from positioning work to exploratory work. We've seen work done on, healthcare positioning all the way to political attitudes. So wide variety of use cases. And then we also have AI researchers using that integration, and they're benefiting not only from the speed, but also from the global capabilities of the Remesh platform and of the prolific audience. And I know we might talk a little bit later about this, but the fact that Remesh has been very intentional about opening up global audiences and doing that in a way that's representative has been a really big and kind of exciting unlock for the AI research space.
Yeah. That's a good segue for our next poll. So quick background. You may know me from the Grit Report. We've been the Greenbook Research Industry Trend Study. Right? So we've been tracking these types of things for a very long time. And one of the questions perennially is cheaper, faster, better. Right? What's the priority? And there's other priorities in there as well, but those always come in. And we've seen that shift. A few years ago, it was speed and cost. Now it is quality. And so there we go. What is your top priority? What drives your decision making? And it's okay. All three of them are important considerations. So it's not an either or, but it is which ones do you prioritize in your decision making and choosing a partner or a methodology. Okay.
Yeah.
While that's happening, I'm sorry. I just want to throw out. I didn't say please submit any questions you have as we go. We'll just kind of roll them into the conversation. So please feel free to submit them into the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh no, I was going to build on what you were talking about. The kind of trifecta of speed and quality and cost. And at Remesh, we've always prioritized quality. I had the opportunity to work with a researcher recently who I think just said it so well. She said, as insights professionals, we really live and die by the quality of the data that we collect and how true that data is to human experience. I just thought that was so beautifully put, and it really underscores why we have been prioritizing quality, especially as we do qualitative research or support qualitative research primarily. I'll give a quick example of where this trade-off comes in our work. So as I mentioned, we not only do data collection, but we do data analysis, and we use large language models to leverage, we leverage large language models to power some of that analysis. And most researchers have done some summarization at this point with large language models. If you're using a fairly basic prompt to ask for summarization, the turnaround time is pretty quick. What we're exploring with Remesh right now is to do a lot of calculations and analysis on our side, on the back end with the data, and then pass it through for a much deeper, more granular insight into the data. But when you do that, when you're passing so much what's called context through the window of an LLM, it gets slow. So we're making this trade-off between how fast we want that summary to come back and how deep, how insightful do we want that summary to be. And right now we're erring on, I think researchers are going to be willing to wait a little bit to get a better report outcome. Of course, as a product leader, I want it to be as fast as possible for the user, and I'm sure the models are going to speed up and we'll get there soon, but that's how we're making, just an example of how we're making that trade-off. I will say for prolific, we don't have to sacrifice speed for quality. Those two things come hand in hand. So that has been very nice.
Well, how do you balance that, Sarah? Right. So you have to keep a healthy marketplace, right? Supply and demand, and keep those balanced. Yeah. And that's why people opted for River Sample because it was just an open supply. So how do you work to keep those balanced out?
Great question. And you sort of allude to this, so I don't know if our attendees know. So Prolific is a platform that basically has onboarded all of its participants by hand, right? So we don't aggregate other panels at all. And so we have 200,000 participants we advertise as our participants, but they're actually just our active sample. And we have quite a large number of participants in the wider pool. And then on top of that, we actually have 5 times that number in our waiting list at any given time. And so you can imagine there's a fairly strong sort of network effect there and participant sort of community pull towards us or push towards us. I can never get that right. But because of this, when they are on our system, you do tend to see, again, leveraging this heritage, leveraging the fact that the work they do through partners like Remesh is interesting and cerebral and thoughtful, and not just sort of like, just repetitive surveys. You'll see that their behaviors are generally good baseline, and we don't have to. It's only at the edge that we feel there's this trade-off between speed and quality. In large part, those things are in healthy balance. Now, to keep them that way, as we're growing as a company and we have more sort of demand on our participant pool, we have to do a constant data science work and analysis to make sure that the available participant minutes on one side of the marketplace is the right number to serve the research demand on the other side of the marketplace. If those two things come out of sync, that's not good for the health of the network. So we do a bunch of this, and yeah, I think we're privileged to say that those speed and quality don't come into tension with each other very much, except that edge, right? Like, so if people are submitting survey responses in seconds, right, then you're looking at signals, and we're looking at signals like that. But where it gets interesting nowadays for us is representativeness. So this is sort of populations or groups of samples of human beings that are pegged to certain proportions out in the world. For example, the most obvious one is sort of census pegged. So if you use the UK representative sample on Prolific, the proportions you get in your survey would be pegged to the UK census. Same thing with the US census. And when representativeness comes into play, it gets more tricky to balance that sort of stool. And that's where we're working with Remesh as well on this. The more you push for diversity of opinion and diversity of thought, the more you want to make sure you're balancing against data quality.
Right. So, well, you guys want to talk about that? What are you doing? If you can give a peek on what that is.
So exciting. Jessica, I was thinking to myself, we should call it a snow globe. But yeah, we're essentially, as Jessica was alluding to, we're partnering to represent the entire world's proportionate population in a small sample, big enough, let's call it big enough sample, so that we can then sort of train systems that really represent the world's voices and diversity of thought.
So that gets us into a whole other topic on synthetic sample, I think, but we'll get to that in a minute. It does bring up a question, though, that again, it hadn't really occurred to me till right now. So you have two Prolific, in my view, has two primary sources of business, right? There's market research, and there's providing for AI training sets. And the participant experience is going to be different in those, where market research, we have surveys and qualitative, right? And the qualitative part is growing, the Remesh type of business. And my guess is that the AI training sets is more ethnographic in nature. Take pictures of this, tell us this, show us these things. So is that diversity of experience, does that help with both engagement and quality within your audience?
Do you mean the diversity of the types of studies?
Yes. They can do all types of different things. It's not just surveys.
Absolutely. I mean, we have this feedback from our participants directly and through qual and quant user research. They love the variety, and I think the trick for us is putting the right participants in front of the right research, because not everyone is going to be the right person to take a picture of their cat or write you 4 paragraphs, as Jessica was saying, right? So that's the trick of it, is in this very large pool making that match perfectly. But yeah, they love the diversity of types of data collections that we put in front of them.
Okay, so now let's think about the future. And let's talk about this partnership, right? So you've hinted at you're working on this larger initiative to kind of profile and create a sample of the world. What else? What can you tell us without giving away, secret sauce? What things can we expect in the future out of this relationship, or individually, as for each company, based on this trajectory that we all see?
Sure.
That,
I can
okay.
start us off. Yeah, I can be honest. We're at the very beginning of this particular integration and partnership. What we have now is pretty basic. Just to call back to our Ben and Jerry's analogy, I don't know if most people know this, but the first ice cream flavor they came out with was vanilla, the basics, and then they built from there. So I feel like that's where we are. We're at vanilla. We have our basic integration, and I can tell you two things that are on our near-term roadmap that I'm pretty excited about. So one is the capability to screen out participants. This is actually maybe table stakes for market researchers. So even though Prolific has, I think, over 200 different recruiting criteria, market researchers need to be able to make sure they're talking to an audience that's familiar with their specific brand. So that ability to say like, hey, do you know XYZ brand? And if not, we're not going to be speaking with you today, and the ability to screen them out, that's really critical. And Sara and her team listened to that need that we had from Remesh. I don't think it was necessarily prioritized for them or on the roadmap, but it was something that they built and had to re-architect some of what they have, to ensure that even participants who weren't going to be completing the full study still got paid. So that's a really great example of our partnership, of us saying, hey, we really need this for the type of research we're supporting, and them kind of being great partners for us in that. The other thing that I'm really excited for us to bring through the partnership is the ability to do a live Remesh session with Prolific Recruit. So I don't know if I mentioned this, and I don't know how much context people have for Remesh, but most of Remesh's studies are done live. So that's, everyone is coming into the platform, submitting their opinions, voting on each other's reactions at the same time. And that's really impactful, both for kind of the organic nature of the research, and also for stakeholders who are viewing the event. It becomes a really great way to get buy-in in research, which is part of the challenge with research. So live is just such a special thing that Remesh has, and we want to make sure that our users can do a live session and recruit through Prolific at the same time. So that's another thing that we're going to be working on.
Cool. And Sara, how are so those things obviously you're working on? What else? What can we expect from you?
So we're continuing down the path of the, just to kind of touch on what Jessica's saying, we're continuing down the path of the API and programmatic integration journeys. We think this is going to be a pretty big innovation roadmap for us for a while. And then also on the ethical custom screening, we kind of want to do this differently. There's this really bad wraparound around screening among sort of survey and research respondents online. We're trying to do this in a super ethical way. We mandate honorarium payment. We're going to add some optionality about sort of including and excluding screened out participants in your N, and just make it easier to use. Really, there's a variety of journeys you might follow in order to screen. Yeah, I think generally speaking, some of our focus areas, without giving too much away, are we now have sort of these lots of different use cases that were exemplified in the first poll we did. And what we've learned over the last few years is that they have a lot more in common than they have different about them. But people who are here to do market research or here to do academic research, which actually that's the first use case. The primary one was academic behavioral research. And people who are there to do AI training, they probably want to be guided through the journey a little bit different, and they want different things to be put in front of them, and that sort of ease of use and sort of like different configurations of scale and things like that is another sort of innovation area for us. And we're also very interested in segmenting our participant pool. We have this like really beautiful and well cared for community, but different researchers need different things from it. And we want to make it easier to find the types of participants you need and sort of get it at a glance. You need AI taskers, you need sort of 35 dairy farmers, you need whatever else. So that's another area where we're focused on in the next sort of few months.
Okay. And there's a comment in the chat that I have no clue what this is
Uh,
about.
I have some context here. I will
Okay.
admit, though, John, I don't know which one the Sarah Frank one was. These things happen every so often. We call it the TikTok spikes, and we see them in our data. And the first time it happened, which was before my time here, I think it took us a little bit by surprise. So basically, Prolific went viral among participants online. And we had a massive influx of registrations on the participant side. But since then, this was a couple of years ago now, we now have a waiting list, and we invite from the waiting list programmatically. So depending on demand. So if we see more demand for, I don't know, Germans, then we'll invite more Germans. And if we, okay, yeah, I think that was the one that took us by surprise. So we now have a programmatic wait list. And in addition, we now have quite a lot of sort of quota configurations for your sample, and representative samples as well are ways for you as a researcher to control the proportions of people in your studies and in your research. So that was a really, apparently it sort of lives in Prolific lore, but since then this happens every so often. We see it in the data, but we're kind of guarded against it now through some mechanisms we have in the product.
Well, so what a quality problem to have, right? Most panel companies do not go viral for any good reason. So if that happened and you have lots of people who want to participate, that says a lot.
Yeah, there were Sarah Frank fans, which apparently they're quite a homogeneous group of people. Apparently, I don't know who Sarah Frank is, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm a 53-year-old non-TikTok user. All right, and Louise says Prolific is incredibly popular on social media platforms. It's lovely to see. Okay, good to know. So, all right, we kind of danced around this. Let's do a poll. It's our final poll before we dive into this last topic, and that is, what is your experience with synthetic sample? So, Chloe, if you want to bring that up, and why that's happening. My personal view is that I think there's a definitional issue here. So I separate it into two buckets in my head. One is synthetic sample, which is fully AI-driven personas that can be used to either potentially replace or at the very least supplement traditional research samples. That's one. The other, and the one that I like better, is the idea of we have lots of profile information. It's kind of the flip side of what I just talked about, and using that these personas in very limited and focused ways to generate exploratory ideation or hypothesis testing that can inform research, not to replace research. So that's my two views on that. Obviously, you guys, you're sitting on a bunch of data, Sarah, within Prolific. Remesh, the same thing, Jessica, and I know some of your customers are, I'm sure, asking, as they build their data lakes, how the data can be leveraged in those ways. So what does that look like? What do you guys think the future looks like for synthetic sample for the industry, for your companies? What are you seeing?
And
I
can
go.
I was going to say, I can kick us off. Yeah, I think we're in an exploratory phase for synthetic sample. I'll share that we've productized it in a way that is impactful for our customers. So the way that we use synthetic sample currently in our product is for practicing or demoing Remesh. So instead of having to invite real people into a practice conversation before it goes live in the field, you can use synthetic participants to do that. So you can get really comfortable with your study before you're launching it. That's a really practical application, low risk. You're not collecting real data. And it scales also for demoing Remesh. So that's how we're using it right now. We are exploring with kind of that first use case or first way method you were talking about, Lenny, as we improve that synthetic sample of just improving those personas that we use. But I think what's more interesting and powerful is being able to augment the data that's collected from human experience. So if you've if you've done a study with a few hundred participants, you could augment it using synthetic sample into the thousands so that you can get the type of confidence and statistical significance that you might have only been able to get previously with quant. And I think that, I know we'll talk a little bit more about the future of the industry, but I think that is really going to increase the usability and the access of qual research to this end. I am very hesitant about research where it's entirely grounded in large language model generated responses. I think it's quite risky. If you think about it, large language models are predictive models. So the responses you're going to get are going to be predictable. They're going to probably be a bit reductive and give you kind of a stereotypical response. So that is the big risk area that I think that we need to be cognizant of as we're developing synthetic sample. But that being said, if you're using human data as your grounding, as your foundation, and you're able to build off of that in a very smart and capable way, I think we're definitely going to start to see scaling of qual data from that.
Okay. Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, so first of all, very, very interesting space, and we're feeling very thoughtful about it and thinking about it a lot. And I think we try to keep ourselves in check at Prolific, and we don't want to be too pedantic about this, right? All of knowledge about people is synthetic to some extent. There's some kind of synthesis that happens in order to represent people at some point in the pipeline. However, I think for us, because we talked about us being the sort of the well or the root of the pipeline, right? In the end of the day, the humans that are part of that process come from Prolific. We're being very careful about this, and we'd like to remain, at least for the foreseeable future, sort of a product and a network and a partner where you can kind of trust that there's real humans giving you responses. And we think we'll end up in relationship with partners who are building and using synthetic sample, and I think that's totally fine. But we are seeing early indications that, as you said, AI models sort of fed on their own supply, to use that sort of framing, will start to output gibberish, and that humans, I think, are going to be involved in these processes. And obviously in sort of behavioral research and academic research, as Jessica says, we'd have to be very thoughtful and ethical about making decisions about things like social policy based on synthetic sample. So I think for us, we want to be that sort of grounding function and that sort of breath of sort of pure water that the process will need towards the end. And we think that the use of human data in these pipelines will probably push right towards the sort of I think you said last mile at one point, Lenny. So I think that AIs will be able to do more of the simpler stuff for each other, and synthetic sample will be able to represent more of the sort of earlier preliminary sort of data sets and things like that. But when you want to ensure or constitutionally check or fine tune, or I think these sort of final activities, I think you will always want to return to reliable human beings. So that's our current position on this. It's a very fast moving field, and I don't know what this will look like in 1 year, right? Let alone 5. But yeah, very interesting thing that we're thinking about internally.
Well, so all right, now we're really going to go. We're going to go off script here a little bit, because this is fascinating. And we don't have a script. We do have some questions we had think about. So Albert just put something in the chat, which I think is just a really interesting question on regulatory compliance, data privacy controls. And so there's 2 years ago answer to that question, right? And now, as we think about synthetic sample, digital avatars, et cetera, and data feeding the creation of these amalgamations of people, there's a whole other set of considerations there that I don't think we haven't knows the answer to yet. This GDPR, for instance, does it account for, well, Lenny's data went to form this model, so therefore, do I have some ownership stake in that that model? Well, I'm betting that OpenAI would say hell no. But but if you follow the train of thought, right, from then it would say, well, maybe I do. So so let's take it back first. For both of you, both companies, how do you ensure that privacy compliance and regulatory compliance is in place? And just any thoughts on what do you think the future may look like as this continues to evolve? So, Jess, why don't you start, and then we'll go back to Sarah.
Sure. So, both companies comply with SOC 2 and GDPR. So we have our own, I'll speak for Remesh, very strict regulatory process and privacy. As I mentioned before, because of the type of clients that we serve, that's critical for them. So that becomes critical for us. On how we partner with Prolific, it was a long legal process, as you can probably imagine, but there's data processors and data controllers. Remesh is on the data processing side, so that's where all of our kind of legalese and compliance lies. And yeah, in terms of the future and how it's going to be impacted by large language models, I think we're going to constantly need to be keeping up with the technology. Sarah mentioned that at the beginning of the call, there's a lot of kind of self-policing and self-regulation. Because our clients keep a very high bar, that's where our bar is, and we won't adopt anything until we're very sure that it's going to meet our criteria. So that's our kind of general stance on technology adoption and how we balance that with privacy and security.
And as a data controller, you've got a little bit of distance, but Sarah, you're the tip of the spear.
Yeah. So, well, to complicate matters further, sort of, So, we are in partnership and relationship with partners like Remesh, and then there's sort of like survey tools, and in some cases we store data, in some cases we don't. But Jessica's right that this is for us table stakes is what I would say. I mean, in the EU, we are generally sort of like brought up on GDPR as kind of baseline, and it's as much as you may disagree with the framework, it has taught us good practices in general, and it's baked in at the ground. So we're SOC 2 compliant and working on other sort of regulatory certifications as well, as we sort of start to hear from our clients about what they need. But if we want to go a little bit more sci-fi, Lenny, to your sort of to your question about how data privacy starts to interact with AI training. So there's a lot of case law being worked out right now around who owns that data, right? When do you have a right to you have a copyright basically to your data when it's fed to a machine and sort of like garbled into something completely different. And then also quite interesting is the insistence in regulatory frameworks on explainability or auditability of AI data, which is going to be really interesting. These machines are not by their nature happy to tell you how they got their answer, but we are thinking about this. So we're thinking about auditability back to data you can prove is consensually and fairly obtained. So we know that is the case on our system. And what if you could hallmark your data that way? And what if that hallmark went with the data wherever it went from there on, and whatever AI it ended up in? So this is a little bit sci-fi now. It's not roadmap, but we do think that explainability and auditability is going to become really interesting in the few years to come.
I agree. We should have a follow-up conversation. I worked on that for a few years.
Cool.
On that idea, right? The blockchain, supply chain. What's supply chain management of data? What does that look like?
I'm super interested in that topic. I'll quickly just say, John, just yes to John's question.
On the ISO 27. Okay. And it's fascinating times, and I think that's what maybe as we head into the final piece here of the future. My sense is Moore's law, right? We're just off the charts in terms of the level of change. It's not going to slow down. And there's big sticky questions around that. But to go back to the beginning, I've never been more optimistic about the opportunity for the insights and analytics function to really drive value creation across the board. And companies, and it starts with companies like you two, right? It's the foundation for the entire ecosystem to engage with humans, give them a path to share their information, and for that information then to be driven to create new value for the folks, for key stakeholders, right? We're there. So I think that is an amazing time to be in this industry overall. And I also think that's going to look much more qualitative than quantitative in terms of the form factor, quantitative scale, qualitative interaction, more of a chat. So obviously companies like Remesh, you're going to help drive that. So what do you guys think? Let's just wrap up with kind of your view in general of where we think the next 2 or 3 years look like. What's your level of optimism? What's the future look like for you? So Jessica, why don't you do it, and we'll wrap up with you, Sarah.
Sure. Also fairly optimistic. I think over the past few years, even, we've seen a trend towards democratization of data and research, where insights teams are still doing very deep, large-scale projects, but they're starting to empower others in their organization to do remesh. And I think that's a trend that we're going to see continue with access to more and more tools. It's going to be easier to do research, easier to get quality participants, easier to do qualitative research. And my hope, and I think we'll see a trend this way, as I mentioned, is that because it will be much easier to do qualitative research, and if we can drive down the cost a bit too with more synthetic sample, that we'll see more qualitative research being done. And the reason why I'm very excited about that is going back to the mission of Remesh, which is empowering researchers to do high quality research, and also allowing people's voices to really be heard. I think with some of our simple survey tools, you just get the abstraction. And if we see more and more qualitative research that's more of a conversation, really diving into people's attitudes and preferences, we're going to get a much richer data set and ultimately make better decisions.
Well said. Sarah.
Yeah, can't wait. I'm actually really just cheering for this this kind of remesh roadmap, and I can't wait for what you have in store, team. I think to add to that, look, I think the possibilities, opportunities, and also the new standards being set for the industry by the age of AI, I think will start to have repercussions and create opportunity spaces in market research and behavioral science and academic research with humans. And I think, as Jessica said, it's going to be possible and actually easy to turn on a tap and get yourself a cross section of the entire globe at your fingertips, like within minutes. I think that's going to become pretty much status quo, which is incredible, right? Online, where was online research 10 years ago, and where might it be in the next few years is really cool to think about. I think data quality, you mentioned that data quality was kind of a expected thing, and then sort of speed and costs were primary, Lenny. And I think data quality will become table stakes again, but in a enhanced way. I think we're gonna have to work for data quality this time around, and work to understand, who originated what piece of data and under what circumstances. And I think that's gonna be really interesting. And the other maybe prediction is, I think representativeness is going to come to the table in a very real way. So we're seeing that AI systems, for example, trained on diverse groups perform much better. We have a bias, at least in academic research, toward weird participants, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic, if I got that right. And I think that's
the definition of weird. I've never heard that.
It was. So I think we'll have to break that. We'll have to break that history, and that's going to be really interesting, because serving online research across the world with all the differences in norms, understandings, and systems and infrastructures is going to be really interesting.
That's great. This has been a wonderful conversation from my perspective, and I appreciate being asked to moderate this. Anything else that either one of you want to add that we didn't touch on?
I don't think so. Thanks, Lenny and Sarah. As I mentioned at the top of the call, I always personally really enjoy our conversations and get some insights from them. So hopefully our audience here did today as well.
Same here.
Great.
Thank you, Lenny. Thank you, Jessica. It was wonderful speaking to you both.
Great. And thank you, audience, for giving us an excuse to do this. Great question. Sorry for the slight delay, but we'll end on time. So with that, goodbye. Have a great rest of your day. And hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.